Hey everybody, you've reached pt1 Productions for the proper teaching of African history. First shout out goes to Jalil, 7-year-old smart little boy, already interested in his history. Keep going, my man. You will reach the top. Find out what Africans did. Rest of the shout outs go to CHA-CHING and the ancestors to whom I promised I would tell the truth to the world. Enjoy. Okay. My name is Reggie Sinkler, and you have reached pt1 Productions, the people who are in charge of the proper teaching of African history, PTAH. Ptah was an African god that Europeans tried to steal. If you take a look at the Oscar Award and you take a look at the statues, ancient statues of Ptah, you realize your history was once again stolen, because that's our African god that we don't even know about, which is the first lesson. If you don't know your history, you are so disadvantaged. If your grandfather wrote a great song and everybody loved it, but that was about 80 years ago, everybody loved it, and but you never met your grandfather, okay? And so you're growing up and you listen to the radio, and this guy has this hot song and it's bad, and you love it, and you admire that man because you think he wrote it, and the song is really the one that your grandfather wrote. Do you understand how not knowing your history puts you at a disadvantage and lets other people take advantage of you? That's the first lesson. Shout out to the ancestors from whom my inspiration comes. Shout out to CHA-CHING, my teacher, Dr. Ben, Asa Hilliard, Sheikh Anta Diop, J.A. Rogers, Theophili Obenga, Dr. Barashango, Dr. Jeffries, and Runoko Rashidi. I learned everything I know from those people and the research they learned from other people. You'd be surprised what's hidden in history. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. All right, history sort of starts out like this. You know, they had Africans with these jet black faces, and they walked the earth all alone. No other races till they traveled from the motherland to the other land, and that's when the course began. The frost began. You know, the pigment loss began the further north the man traveled as he crossed new land. The man now in ice, who once walked in the sand, he slowly began to lose his tan. But on the inside, remember this, the under the skin side, he was still African. He still is. I found this out. I asked my teacher. He had nothing much to say to me. I kept seeking the truth. Only more questions came to me. I kept seeking the truth. Oh, why they blaming me? Kept seeking the truth, and now it's plain to see. The man in the ice who was blaming me, shaming me, talking about he was taming me, I found out he came from me. It's time to get the knowledge. Join the glorious struggle to maintain, stand solid. Ptah, we are people of a mission for truth. Don't believe what they said about you. You got to go out and get the proof. All right? All right. First people to walk the earth were black, jet black Africans. You needed that cover in your skin to keep you from actually having sun poisoning or skin cancer and dying. The people who had no skin color in the eastern hills of Ethiopia, Uganda, they die at the age of 28 on the average. The people with no pigment can't last there because the sun will penetrate your skin. Remember that. When those people left Africa, wait, let me back up. How do we know this? How do we know the first people came from Africa? Trust me, they looked all over the earth. They looked all over Europe for a long time trying to find the oldest bones. 600,000 years old. They said, whoa, we might be first. They went to Asia. The Asian bones were a million and a half years old. Uh-oh. Okay, maybe it's the Asian. When they got to Africa, they had the shock of their life. Bones from 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, 7 million, 8 million years old. There were originally 6 different types of human beings, and every one of those types can be found in their early form in Africa only. You can't find them anywhere else. At one time, Africans walked the earth alone. All the animals in the world were in Africa, and all the people in the world were in Africa. And the world didn't get a population until they left, until they traveled north. And that's when the frost began, the pigment loss. But the only difference between you and anybody on the planet is the skin color and the features. On the inside, they can give you a blood transfusion and you can give them one. And that's true for every type person in the world. Everybody has the same ancestors. You hear me? Everybody has the same ancestors, and they were 2 jet black Africans. And everybody comes from them, and the DNA studies prove it. But don't believe me. Listen to Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, one of my favorite historians. He died about 5 years ago. He's the one that discovered, or proved, I should say, that Africans had been here long before Columbus. He proved that. He showed pictures of these big African heads in Mexico. I'll show them to you. They're dated 500 BC. Columbus got here, 1492, right? AD. You're going to learn some stuff today. But first, listen to Dr. Ivan Van Sertima telling you that up until 55,000 years ago, everybody who walked the planet was African. Check it out. Africans with jet black faces once walked the earth all alone, no other races, until they traveled to the other lands colder than the motherland, and then the cross began. That's when the frost began, the pigment loss began. The further north this man traveled as he crossed new land. The man in the ice who once walked in the sand, soon he began to lose his tan.
This is a figure, a sculpture that was found
Yet on the inside,
Europe, and one of the things that they have
he was still
discovered
African.
is that many of the sculptures of early Europe show various African types. In fact, 55,000 years ago, according to 3 labs, the University of Oxford, the University of Hawaii, the University of California at Berkeley have come to the conclusion that there are no people on the earth 55,000 years ago who are not black Africans.
Approximately how many years was the world populated exclusively and only by Africans, black Africans? Okay, black skin. You're talking about the modern, the last African. Okay, because you see, the African is not only the first hominid, he's also the first human. Okay, the hominid is not completely human like us, but then comes the first human without brain case. That's also African. And this begins to change about 55,000 years ago in Europe, where you get Africoid types becoming Caucasoid types.
What happened to that African once he got to Europe?
Well, you had several ice ages and a change in environment, and the theory is that the change in environment, and especially the ice age part of it, being cut off from the African continent, having a completely different environment with respect to diet and climate and all those things, resulted over a 20,000 year period in physical changes, genetic mutations to adapt to that particular environment. And about 20,000 years or so ago, we have changes sufficient that we look and see distinct people when they really aren't distinct in that sense, in the sense of having groups that can't interbreed. That's what one of the biological definitions of race is, that groups can't, you know, a dog and a cow can't have offspring, so they would be different strains. But varieties of the same family, so that the European that resulted was merely a depigmented African.
Okay, by now you should have learned that 55,000 years ago, Africans lost their color, became what we call today white people. All right? And that for at least 100,000 years prior to that, Africans were here alone. Black people were the only people on earth. All right? All right. So big deal. What they do, Sinkler? Huh? So what you do? Man, they created the basis of our civilization today. Let me ask you, what time is it? What? Oh yeah, how you know? Who said? How long is an hour? 60 minutes? Who said? How you know? Who measured it? Bet you don't know. Man, my students used to make money off the things that I would teach them in class. They go home and bet their parents and make crazy money. Knowledge is power. Want to find out some answers? Check it out.
When the Egyptians struck 110 cities in Asia, they brought these things too into Asia. They brought these things through their invasion of the Greeks. Their things were brought up into Europe. Look at our day. We take our day for granted. The 24-hour day is African. The second of time is African. The second of arc is African. Many of our volumes and weights and measures. And you look at the year, 365 and a quarter day year. That was not for granted. There's no street. To get that, you'd have to have accurate mathematics. The Sumerians or Babylonians or Mesopotamians, as they call them, did not have a 365 and a quarter day year.
True story. I was a substitute teacher in a school for just 2 days consecutively. I come back the second day, and I can't walk down the hallway. The kids are coming out of the door saying, Sinkler, I got paid. I got paid. Now here I am, a new teacher for just 2 days, black man, and the kids yelling, I got paid to me. I had some explaining to do, but it was cool. You see, about 80% of the people in the world know very little about African history. It's been that crushed, that repressed, that held down. So that when people hear this stuff, Sinkler, how you know? That's how I got my job. I was standing in the hallway, principal came by. I said, yo, Mr. Brisbane, baddest principal you ever, Mr. Brisbane, gave me the opportunities to teach what I love. Hey, Brisbane, come here. I'm holding the book. I bet you don't know where we got white people. Said, Sinkler, cut it out. Cut it. I said, no, I'm serious, man. I bet you don't know where white people came from. And then I showed them. And in the book, written by Mr. Asa Hilliard and some other people, Asa Hilliard is the man that was telling that the first black people in Europe were, the first Europeans were black people. The chapter I was reading was the origin of the Caucasoid. Caucasian refers to Europeans. When he saw that title, I bet you never thought. I never thought about where we get white people. They're here like everybody else. No. They're here like everybody else except us. And he talked about the depigmentation, the loss of color, which produced it. Next thing I know, I was teaching African history to 1,600 kids a year. All right, this is the type of stuff they used to make money off. I bet you don't know who the smartest man in history was. The most brilliant human being that ever walked the face of the earth. Most people say, oh, Einstein. Nah. His name was Imhotep. He lived at least 25 to 2,800 years before Einstein. He invented the position of physician. He wrote medical texts. There were no medical texts in the world then. He invented the physician's way of examination and carefully watching the patient. But then also he was an architect. Every doctor's an architect, right? Yeah, right. He built the first stone building in this world. It's called the Step Pyramid. I'll show it to you. It's incredible. There wasn't one building in the world that wasn't made of wood. Not large. They had 7 wonders of the world. That one's still standing. Besides the Great Pyramid, it's the only 2 still here. Africans built for permanence, built with perfection. How'd they do it? High-level math, baby. If you're a student or an adult, a parent, you better get to work. Stop fearing math. We invented it. That's right. I said it. I meant it. And I'm here to represent it.
Well, I'm fond of asking young black students is, why are you afraid of mathematics? Why do you run away from mathematics and physics? Africa invented mathematics and physics. That isn't my opinion, that just happens to be the reality. I didn't make it happen. That just happens to be the way it is. And the Greeks themselves say so, not once, not twice, but at least a dozen times. All the Greek mathematicians studied in Egypt. Eudoxus, Archimedes, Hipparchus, Pythagoras, Thales, Plato. In fact, the Greeks were in a habit, if they didn't study in Egypt, they would say they would in order to give themselves credibility.
Age, a high-tech age, a technological age, which showed that Africans were architects, engineers, astronomers, and so forth, occurs here, and you have nothing like it anywhere else in the world.
It's true. You certainly wouldn't want to determine the circumference of the Earth unless you had, of course, presupposed that the Earth was round. We want to point that out. All of the mathematics that we study today has its roots in Africa. We can start off simply with counting. The very first or the oldest known artifact in mathematics is the Ashango bone. That's over 8,000 years old. It's from the Congo. That's found in Africa. If we go ahead, they had developed fractions. Furthermore, they had developed algebra and, of course, geometry, trigonometry, and it even gone as far as the roots of integral calculus, and this is all before Europe existed.
Mathematics did not begin with the Greeks, even the Greeks say so. Geometry was an African invention, and Pythagoras admitted as much, and so did everybody who came after him. This is a written mathematical papyrus that is 4,000 years old, finding the area of a triangle. Basically, area equals 1/2 the base times the height. Problem number 50, which we don't have up here, the ancient Kamites were also able to find the area of a hemisphere, which is, in modern notation, area equals 2 times pi times r squared, which means that they could also find the area of a sphere, which is 4 pi r squared. They also, therefore, if they knew that much, they knew the area of the circle. And the area of the circle, as we know, is pi r squared. The written mathematical, our modern value for pi is 3.14128. The ancient Kamite value for pi was 3.1605. Rectangle, or the formula for obtaining the area of a rectangle, A equals L times B. This is what you call, this is problem number 14 of the Moscow papyrus. This is the formula for finding the volume of a truncated pyramid. Among these ancient people of the Nile, these ancient black peoples of the Nile, we find the first evidence of algebra, because in the written mathematical papyruses, number 24 to 27, are algebraic equations of the first degree. They also handled algebraic equations of the second degree. Algebra is basically, if you have to strip it down to its essentials, its ability to solve problems when you have an unknown. Now we call that unknown usually X or Y. The ancient Kamites used to call it a quantity. The Great Pyramid, we're only going to say a little bit about the Great Pyramid. Certainly the grandest edifice of its kind ever created by the hand of man. Just want to say I just want to point out two things about the Great Pyramid. 483 feet in height. The base of the pyramid is 13 acres in area. It was built out of 2.7 million blocks of stone. The lightest stone was 1 ton. The heaviest was 7 tons. Planed to such a smoothness that when they were fitted together, if you plucked the hair out of your head, you could not fit it between the joints. Oriented precisely to the 4 cardinal points. The descending passage was built at 3 degrees 43 minutes in slope. Oriented exactly to Alpha Draconis, which shone down it 3340 BC, 3340 BC, and it won't shine it down it again until 26,000 years later. The height of the pyramid, if you multiply it by 1 billion, gives you the mean distance between Earth and Sun. People say that's a coincidence. Well, the height of the pyramid, if you multiply it by 1 billion, gives you the mean distance between Earth and Sun. People say that's a coincidence. Well,
they think it's a coincidence because they can't believe it. Oh, come on, Sinkler, that can't possibly be true. Stop that. How could the Africans know the distance? Stop that. Most of the prejudice, racism, and discrimination against black people is based on ignorance. And when you learn your history, then you know. And you could say, oh, poor guy, he doesn't know. He doesn't realize that what we gave his people and the world. My job, I feel, what I vowed to the ancestors inside of a temple in Nubia was to teach the world the truth about history. Who did what, especially us. Okay. Alright, here's 2 short videos proving 2 things. The first video is Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben Jokanen. He died about 4 years ago. Probably the most studious, well-read, besides John Henry Clark, than any other. He's born in Ethiopia, and you're talking African history, you can't tell him anything. He's also a Jew, the original Jew. Okay? He's going to tell you what school was like in ancient Africa. Any students out there, I don't care what level you're at, high school, college, med school, law school, you never went through anything like this. And nobody else in the world did. And you also had to be holy to go to school in Africa. To attend those schools, you had to be circumcised, you had to be clean of body and mind.
From age 7, at the time when he was circumcised and brought in, at age 47, 40 years of training, studying the 7 liberal arts, science, law, engineering, all that goes with it, and he had qualified in each of his degrees, he became known as a priest. So that means that you who spend 4 years for your bachelor's, 2 years for your master's, and another 2 or 1 depending for your doctorate, you would have just begun to study. And you're talking about a long time of study. You would have been there 40 years without ever going to see your parents or anyone else.
Now, did anybody ever tell you the Africans studied longer, harder than anybody else in the world? That they started the first organized education, that they invented universities? No. Why not? Man, they can't stand it. Listen, one day I tried to get, I just called up every university in New York. Every one of them. Can I please I want to inquire about your PhD program. Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, can I obtain a PhD in Native American? Oh sure. How about European? Oh yes. Asian history? Oh African? Oh no, we don't offer that. It happened over and over across the state of New York. There is not one school that has a PhD program in African history. And nobody's mad. We should be pissed. But it says something. Nobody's in a hurry for us to find out or to even study what we did. Okay? Nobody. Because of things like what I'm about to show you. I'm sure you've heard of Plato. They rave about him. But they don't tell you how he felt. He wrote down in his diary he was having trouble. See, they didn't let Greeks into those schools for a long time because they weren't holy. They weren't willing to be circumcised. And after, I don't know, 500, 1,000 years maybe, they let Greeks in. People you've heard of, Plato, Aristotle, Thales, Pythagoras, Herodotus. And they wrote about it. But what Plato wrote says a lot. Check this out.
He said that he became more alert and more human being. He became more, you see, Malone became a more human being. Not just human being, you became a more yourself. You achieve your destiny when you go to Kemet school. You became a human being, more human. We are a human being already, but more human being. That means more wise. And when you go to Kemet school, when Plato himself compared what they do in Kemet school, I give Greek because no debate. You see, it's our school in Greece, the way we are doing things is just for creatures like pigs. You see, like pigs. You see, and he say myself, I'm ashamed. Myself as a Plato, I'm ashamed. We do things like that, is a shame. And also, not only for myself, for all Greek, the Greek world is a shame. What we can do, our education, when you compare with Kemet, is not even for human beings, it's just for pigs, for animals.
Excuse me for a second. I feel sorry for Plato. Poor Plato. He was ashamed. I understand why he was ashamed. Because Plato didn't get there till around 500 BC, and that school had been there for 2,000 years. And when he went to study science, he worshipped Imhotep, a man that lived 2,000 years before. What are they doing worshiping black people that lived 2,000 years before? Called him the father of healing, the father of medicine. They had incredible respect for these Africans. You'd never know it today unless you study your history. I want you to think about this while you watch the next final clip. What's the truest sign of greatness? How do you know somebody's truly great? What's one thing they have to have? Longevity. If you are truly great, or what your life works are about, are truly great, they'll be remembered. Okay? What athlete that hasn't played in 10 years has the most sneaker sales of anybody? Michael Jordan. People wear Jordans like he's still playing. He's not. But he was so great. And that's the truest sign. Okay? We're in the 2020s. Go back 2,000 years. It would be the year 20. Okay? Imagine Europeans coming to go to college in Africa in the year 20, and we had been there for 2,000 years.
Remember when we were younger, we would hear some interesting tidbit about someone black who had invented something or done something significant in history, and we would wonder aloud, wow, I wonder why they don't teach us that in school. Well, I would argue some decades later that we're in no better position now with regards to our mainstream educational system and what it teaches our young people and our not so young people about our history. You know, Carter G. Woodson, the author of the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, asserts that a man receives two educations, one that is given to him and the other that he gives to himself. Well, we're about to take the long journey into looking into the historical contributions of people of African descent. Where will we begin? I mean, what have we done? What have we contributed to world civilization in the areas of mathematics, science, architecture, astrology, astronomy, medicine? If we wanted to find out, where would we begin? Well, we can begin in the most ancient of days. We could begin with an African, a multi-genius of a man. His name, Imhotep.
Imhotep was the first multidimensional character in human history. There was no personality in human history that we can read about, that's written about before Imhotep, a black man. The first person with texture in human history. In other words, everybody before that was mentioned, you mentioned the name. You had the name of kings. You had their name, but you did not have any details about them. The first person we have details about in history is a black man, Imhotep.
Imhotep, the father of medicine and a black multi-genius. The achievements of the black people of ancient Egypt have shown us that black people built truly one of the greatest civilizations of ancient times. But do you know that a person generally regarded as the most talented individual in the history of the ancient world was a black man? He was an Egyptian named Imhotep. Imhotep was the son of an architect. He lived during the reign of King Zoser of Egypt in 2980 BC. He was an exceptionally brilliant man. He was versed in medicine, architecture, engineering, philosophy, poetry, religion, and astronomy. It is through his work and writings that the Western world first learned of the existence of objective and scientific medicine based on the repeated and careful observation of a patient. It is said also that Imhotep knew about the circulation of the blood. He discovered this at least 4,000 years before it was known in Europe. Imhotep diagnosed and treated more than 200 diseases. These included disorders of the eyes, bladder, abdomen, and skin. Imhotep's contribution to the development of medical knowledge in the ancient world was such that the Greeks worshipped him as the father of medicine and their god of healing. Today, Western civilization holds to the belief that the Greek Hippocrates was the father of medicine. Yet, the Hippocratic oath taken by every medical doctor in Western civilization pays homage to the god Apollo and the father of medicine, Asclepius, which incidentally was the Greek name for Imhotep.
Hey, listen, I hope this has been informative for you. But the teacher training in me says you have to review if you want somebody to truly remember something you told them. So can we go over what you learned and what you could make money off? But that's another thing. We learned that the first people on earth were Africans, right? That they were here alone. We learned that in 55,000 BC, he began to lose his color. But on the inside, he's still African. That eventually, those Africans invented time. They were the first ones to measure the minute, second, hour, 365 and a quarter day year. They invented math and science, and they used it to make the calendar, to chart the stars. They invented organized education and universities. They invented geometry and science. Remember, they were writing trigonometry on paper 1,000 years before Greece began, before Europeans had ever wrote anything. And that the first multi-genius of a man in the world was named Imhotep. And he was worshipped by the Greeks 2,000 years after his death for his knowledge and his ability to heal. And when you take the Hippocratic Oath today, you say, I swear by Apollo and Escapularis. That's the first sentence in the Hippocratic Oath. And Escapularis is the Greek name for Imhotep, the black African that invented medicine. Now, when somebody asks you, bet you don't know anything Africans did, you know what you say? You know the right answer, right? Really? Want to bet? Yeah, if you desire a little more history, just look for me. This is like my first live video broadcast, but it won't be the last. I assure you, you will have something.